Hello, I'm Zelda, and welcome to my closet. In this space, I will share with you from my own experience as a trans woman and as a queer person, and I'll talk a little bit about coming out, why that is important, and what that has meant for me, just in terms of like confidence and mental health. Disclaimer, I am not a mental health practitioner. But yeah, let's get into it. So, I grew up in a very conservative environment where it was not acceptable to be queer, whether you were gay, lesbian, anything like this. I never even knew that trans people existed until I was probably in my very early 20s. So I grew up in South Africa, very conservative. It was acceptable to bully queer people where I lived. It was acceptable to bully gay men and lesbian women. And so there was a lot of social stigma, and the anxiety and the angst of being a queer person in an environment like that is just very difficult to deal with. And so I grew up in this fairly strict environment where people were mocked just for wearing like certain clothing that they liked. I remember cross-dressing back when I was about 4 or 5 years old. But then also remember very clearly that it was not seen as something that I was allowed to do or should do. And so I was clearly steered away from embracing my queer identity and exploring that part of myself. So didn't really know much about being trans as a kid at all. When I was a teenager, I knew about transvestites, and I knew about drag queens. But of course, there's a huge difference between being a transvestite and being a transgender woman. So yeah, growing up in this very strict environment, I did not know much about what it meant to be trans. I presented as a male. I had gay friends and lesbian friends when I was a teenager, but I didn't know any trans people. The first trans person I met was on the East Coast in a small city on the East Coast in the United States. And it was a friend, through a friend who had a parent who was trans. And this was a very significant interaction for me. I interacted with this person a few times, and it really left an impression on me. It was like, hold on a second, they are trans people who who are not transvestites, right? They present this way all the time. When I presented as a man, I had a long-term relationship with a woman for many years, and this was kind of a comfortable place for me to hide. At the time, I did not really understand what it meant to be trans. Okay, I just thought that I was a man and that I had an interest in cross-dressing. I didn't do it much, but I just thought of it as like a kinky thing, right? Or just as like a fetish, okay? But the relationship came to an end, and it was actually a very good thing for me because I was heavily ingrained in religion where I could hide as a man, right? And also in this relationship, I could hide under the label of man, dating a woman. But yeah, something just was not quite right, and I just could never understand what that was. I just felt miserable in my body and literally just hated myself and not being able to understand why. One day I decided to just buy some like cheap used women's clothing on like eBay or something. So I bought like a skirt or something like this, and it wasn't like beautiful, like dressed like this or anything like this, right? It was just something like cheap that I just found on eBay, and it was something that I hid in like my dresser, deep underneath all of my like boys' clothing, right? And occasionally I'll take it out when I'm all by myself, and I would wear it just for like a few seconds. And I remember this feeling of just feeling like, sort of like energized and like, wow, this feels amazing. But again, I just thought of it as something that I shouldn't be doing, and I thought of it as a fetish or something like this, okay? And since that moment, I've always had like some like women's clothing that I was hiding away somewhere and didn't want anybody to see. My desire to cross-dress grew and grew and grew, and it didn't like go away, okay? And and it wasn't like a big deal. For years, I was just like cross-dressing and in isolation, in the closet, right? And it was a good, it was like fine. It was like, it met a certain need for me. But that desire started growing and growing, and eventually just sort of like grew out of control. Fast forward a couple years, I moved to California, which California is an amazing place if you're a queer person. I then thought, so again, having this upbringing from a very traditional religious upbringing, I then thought that, you know what, maybe I can meet this need I have to just be a bit different by dating another man. And so I did something very courageous. I started dating a man. So I was a man, presented as a man, and had a same-sex relationship with another man. But this really like opened up a lot of my thinking about myself. There's so much to say here. But I had a short relationship with another man. It only lasted about 3 months. And at the end of that 3-month relationship, I realized that what I needed to do was I needed to come out as a trans woman, and I needed to live full-time as a trans woman if I wanted to just sort of like be happy all the time, okay, and not just be happy in secret. And so if you're a trans woman, I'll just give this one-liner. If you're a trans woman, it can be incredibly affirming to date a man, right? If a man is interested in you, because you think about traditional relationships, man-woman, oh, there's a man who's interested in me and sexually interested in me, that experience can be very gender affirming, okay? And when I dated a man, this was my experience. I felt affirmed as a woman. And I realized this, that I was incredibly feminine around this person when we were together, and just realized how far that was from the reality that I was living. Yeah, so this desire to dress like a woman and look like a woman just dominated my thinking. And I would go to work. I developed a really odd behavior. I would be alone all the time where I could just cross-dress, but then in the mornings I'll get up, I'll shower, I'll shave, and then it's like, okay, I gotta go to work. And then I start dressing up clothing, and I'll look at myself in the mirror, and I was like, I'm still presenting as a man. I would look at myself in the mirror and I would go, oh my God, people can't see me like this. I look way too feminine. And then I'll slowly start taking off some clothing articles and putting on other clothing articles until I looked acceptable enough for me to go out and not be completely feminine. Hard to explain this, but I desperately wanted to break this boundary where I lived in isolation and I had this private life of being a woman, and having a public life of being a man. I needed to break that barrier. And I had an incredible amount of anxiety about that. How do I go about this change? How do I break this barrier? And quite frankly, at the time, I believed that it could not be done. I couldn't do it. I would not have the mental strength and capacity to do that. I certainly did not have the support to do that. In terms of friends, my friends were still like a bunch of like straight dudes. I had to deal with my own internalized transphobia. I was afraid of being trans and of being known as a trans person. I did not want that label. I did not want to be labeled as a trans person. Yeah, so eventually my desire to express myself and look more feminine became really strong. And I started taking hormones. And you can get hormones just like on a retail, your favorite online retail store, right? When it comes to hormones, you don't want to play around with that stuff. You want to know exactly what you have in your body. Why? Because if you drastically change your hormone levels, you can form blood clots. So you are at risk of getting a heart attack or a stroke. I had eye surgery about 3 years ago or so, and I had to have general anesthesia. So I disclosed to a medical health practitioner that I was taking hormones. And this was now on my medical record. And I just realized that I need help. I need help. I started digging around. It wasn't easy, but eventually learned that, hey, there's actually a LGBTQ clinic pretty close to where I live. So I signed up. I was like, I need to go to this thing. And I want to start taking hormones properly because I realized I was not going to stop taking hormones, okay? And I want to take it with the help of a medical health practitioner so that I know what's going on in my body and so that I can know that I am healthy. And so this was a major sort of like revelation to me. I had to take better care of myself. I also started joining a support group where other queer people went to the support group. And I'm not going to tell you my age. Should I tell you my age? I mean, I'm like in my 40s, okay? I know I look fabulous, thank you. But yeah, I'm in my 40s. And so finding support for people who are my age is actually not that easy. I to this day, I still don't know many trans people who are my age. It took quite a while, but I eventually met other queer people. And in particular, I met a couple of amazing lesbian women and gay men. It's just so good to be able to share and to talk to other queer people about your queer experience. We all have some commonalities in our experience. So gathered my support group, which was very, very amazing for me, and then started hormone therapy, and it was quite an amazing experience. It was slow. It was like, I was hoping for like immediate like results pretty soon, but it didn't work that way for me. Started taking estradiol tablets, and the changes were very sort of like incremental and small. I administered hormones safely. I had an still have an amazing physician who took care of me and takes care of me at this queer clinic. And I'm so glad that I have this resource available. Hormones does not change your inner voice. Okay, I've seen this on like YouTube videos and things like that. People would say when you start taking estrogen as a trans woman that it strengthens the feminine voice in your head. The truth is that is nonsense. Okay, and in fact, if you think you have two personalities because of hormones, I highly recommend that you talk to a mental health practitioner about this. No, you're the same person. I'm the same person I was 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago. I mean, I sure as hell express myself differently and look differently, but those experiences from the past are still part of me. I still had this double life though. I would still cross dress when I was at home and go to work presenting as a man. However, I decided to make small changes in the way I present myself. So I started wearing like very tight women's pants and like women's blouses, and I did that for quite a while. Um, and then sort of grew in my private life in how I would dress and how I would present myself. Um, Eventually, I just felt the need to be out as trans. I had a performance evaluation with a supervisor at work, and I decided that I was going to disclose to this person that I am trans and that I will come out at some point and probably do that at work. And so I did. I told this my supervisor, who was sort of like head of, you know, other folks I worked with as well. And it was good for me to do that. And I'm not saying you should do that, but here I'll give you one reason why this can help you. If the top person knows, it makes it a lot easier to like share this information with other people down the hierarchy, right? Down the ladder, whatever. And that was my thinking. And so when I shared this information with her, it did help me. They didn't know exactly what to do with that information, and rightfully so. Like, what expectations do you have? So think about that. What expectations do you have? They might not just shower you with like praise or anything like that. They might just say nothing because maybe they've never had anybody share this type of information with them. But to make a long story short, over the next couple of months, I was very intentional and I just wanted to be out. So what I did was I would literally show up to like staff meetings with all these big name folks, and I would literally say, "Hey," I would ask my supervisor if I can make an announcement, and she's like, "Yeah," and I was like, "I'm gonna tell people I'm queer," and she was like, "What? Huh? Okay," and I would literally make an announcement. I'll be like, "Hey, I want you to know that I am transgender, and that I recently started hormone therapy, and that I'm in the process of coming out." And then I did this in multiple stages and on multiple occasions where I said, "Hey, I want you to know that I am changing my name. I want please call me by my new name." Then I had another supervisor who I worked with more directly, and I remember very clearly me telling this person that, "Hey, I'm trans and that I'm making people aware that I'm coming out and that I will change my name to Zelda." His response was this. He said, "Okay, I will make the change in my mind right now that you want to go by Zelda. And from now on, I will always call you Zelda." And I was kind of like amazed by the response. I was like, that was it? That it was that easy for me to like be out at work? And he was like, "Yeah, I'll make that change right now." And so I'm very fortunate because I've had amazing support at work. I did not know how that process would go, and I cannot guarantee that for anyone else, unfortunately. Okay. I did run into a lot of challenges at work. So with the key big name supervisors who I worked with, I had support, but there were other people who I worked with more on a day-to-day basis that it was really difficult. I had a lot of things I had to work through and a lot of challenges there, a lot of misgendering, clearly folks who were not queer friendly. But so why is it important to be out? Why do queer people talk about coming out and being out? Well, in context of what I just shared with you, um, being out has been so good for me. All right. So first off, I look at myself in the mirror now and I'm like, damn, I look freaking amazing. And this is not a short-term thing. This has been ongoing for like years, for a couple of years now. Like I would say about two years now. Okay, where I look at myself, I get dressed for work, I put on a beautiful dress. Sometimes I do makeup, like today. Other times I just don't have time, so it's just like lipstick and glasses, right? So I don't have to do eye makeup. But still, I would look at myself before I leave the door and I go, wow, I look freaking amazing. And for me to say that about myself is like is like a big deal, okay? Just, this has been a long conversation. But think about what I told you about me looking at myself years back when I presented as a male and how I just hated myself. I had severe body dysphoria. I hated my body as a man. I hated the way I looked, my clothing. I felt horrible in my clothing. It just affects your mental health on so many levels. And now for me to like wear whatever the hell I want to and look at myself in a mirror and think to myself, oh my god, I look amazing. Like that is such a huge shift in mind. And yeah, I'll share this with you. I sometimes just stare at myself in the mirror for like a long time and I'm like, oh my god, like I look freaking amazing. So to my left here, what you can't see is a huge mirror that I bought for this purpose, to wear what I want to, and then so I can just like look at myself in the mirror and think about what I want to change and how I want to adapt and how I want to present myself in public. Yeah. So another reason to be out. Another reason to be out is that it lessens your anxiety. When you're not out, think about me, the situation I explained to you where I lived in isolation in a room where I cross-dressed, I looked one way, but in public I looked a complete different way. This creates anxiety because you live a double life. It's a horrible thing. You live one way in private and so desire to be different, but then you switch your way of relating to yourself and looking at yourself so that you can present yourself differently in public. It creates anxiety. It creates anxiety because you start thinking, well, what parts of my private life am I carrying with me? And you're performing. It's a performance. You're performing now to be this like dude who you hate to be. Okay? And so this creates a tremendous amount of anxiety. Not a fun experience whatsoever. So when you come out, you break down those boundaries. You literally break down the walls of your closet so you can be out. And you don't have that anxiety anymore. Let me just say this though. Coming out is difficult. I don't want to take away from that experience. Coming out is hard. Starting that process and starting to make people aware that you're a trans woman, or telling people that you're a gay man or a lesbian woman for the first time, that is not an easy thing. And this is an experience that all LGBTQ folks share. This is what we have in common, is that, if you are out, that we have that experience of of going through that process of being out and coming out. Okay. So why be out? Why be out of the closet? Why be public about who you are? It lessens your anxiety. It helps you to live an authentic life. It helps you to just love yourself. which is something which is really amazing thing for me to say about me, is that, like, you know, you can think what you want, but I now look at myself and I'm like, damn, I look amazing. Oh my god, look at Zelda, she's beautiful. It's just raised my confidence level, and I don't know, like I am a lot less of a hermit. I like to be social now. I'm like, I want to be social and hang out with people and share my beauty with other people. Like that is a huge thing, right? For somebody who's just been isolated for years and years and years. If a stranger asks you about your sexual preference or about your gender, your response should be, why are you asking? It is none of your business. That's the correct response. However, if you willingly share this information with people, it is different. Because, yes, it's nobody's business, but because I break that barrier, and because I am out, I'm out of the closet and I am living this authentic life, when you willingly choose to do that, it just reduces your anxiety. Again, coming back to this double life, there's no wondering about who knows what, and you just don't care anymore after a while. And you will learn actually in time that, especially if you live in a place like California, that people actually don't care, and that they're just happy for you. That was a mouthful. I think I'm gonna stop there. This was a great conversation, and maybe I'll pick up on this again at another point. I'll see, maybe not.